Welcome back to Legitimate Targets, everybody. I hope you're all having a great day. I've got a very special guest joining me on today's episode, and it's important that you all listen, tune in, and share this far and wide, because as we sit here, I'm getting notifications on my phone that Israeli media is putting out surrounding the warnings that Israeli ministers are claiming that they're sharing with Netanyahu, saying, oh, goodness, we have to go to war with Iran once more. So joining me on today's episode to discuss all of this and more is Foad Izadi. He is an Iranian academic and associate professor of American Studies at the University of Tehran's Faculty of World Studies, specializing in public diplomacy, U.S. foreign policy, and Iran-U.S. relations. So, Mr. Izadi, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you're doing well. What do you make of this news? We have Jerusalem Post, we have Israel Hoyam, we have anonymously source Israeli ministers citing that this is coming down the line, a second war of aggression against Iran. What do you make of this?
I think you have to take them seriously. They attacked Iran once, killed more than 1,000 civilians. In the middle of negotiations, Iran was going to Oman. The Iranian foreign minister announced the sixth round of negotiations with the United States. And Steve Witkoff had announced that he would go to Oman. Trump, just a few hours before the attacks, Israeli attacks, had a tweet saying that negotiations were going well and he expected good results. And then you had the attacks. They didn't finish the job. They wanted to overthrow the Iranian government. They want to balkanize Iran. They want to disintegrate Iran. They want to create 5 or 6 countries out of Iran. And that hasn't been achieved. We had this rally around the flag effect among the population. So in fact, they worked against their own goal. But, you know, they're engaging in a genocide in Palestine as we speak, and they don't have any ethical limitations. They're willing to kill thousands of people to reach some foreign policy goal. And they have done it before, so you have to take them seriously.
There was a report out a few days ago that Israel, specifically the defense minister, was warning Netanyahu that they should end the aggression against Iran on the 4th day of the conflict in the 12-day war, as Trump dubbed it. And they didn't do that because Netanyahu got the idea to force the United States to join the aggression against Iran. Why do you think they're, I guess, so deranged that they would believe that this time a second act of aggression would go any better for them than the first one?
You know, they killed a number of high-ranking Iranian generals, scientists. I think the calculation they have is that they may not be successful again. So they may not achieve their goal of regime change or disintegration of Iran, but they can kill more people. And this is what they have been doing in Lebanon. Every few days, hitting targets, killing people. They call it death by 1,000 cuts. So the calculus, I think, is that by attacking Iran again, they can basically advance their Iran project more, and then maybe after a few hits, then they can get to some level of success. I think that would be a mistake. I think last time Iranian officials were surprised. They didn't think the other side would attack in the middle of negotiations. But this time, they are more prepared. They're not going to be surprised. And one thing they realize is that if attacking Iran is cost-free, or if the cost is manageable by the other side, then these type of attacks would continue. So although the possibility of another attack on Iran is serious, I think that would be a big mistake for both Israel and United States, because the level of tolerance here, I think, has reached its limit. The new commanders that are running the Iranian military don't want to see the reputation of what you saw last time. So they want to fight, they don't want to die. And that would result in a more serious response by Iran. And I think that would be not very good for Israel and United States.
You know, a lot of people expected Iran to shut off, key trade routes, maritime trade routes, the Strait of Hormuz, in response to American participation in the first war. That didn't happen. Do you think that the leadership of Iran might take decisions like that if their sovereignty is violated once more?
That has been debated in Iran for a long time. There are some people here that are supporting that idea that would create cost for the other side. And there are some people who don't support that idea. That would hurt China in a serious manner, because China is getting about 50-60% of its energy from the Persian Gulf. And in responding to Israel and United States, Iran doesn't want to hurt countries like China. Mm-hmm. So there is a debate going on. That is an option that Iran has. And if things get tougher, that's one of the options that Iranian officials can use.
I saw the statements like everyone else. President Pezeshkian spoke about how Iran has never developed a nuclear weapon and does not intend to develop a nuclear weapon. And we all know the fatwa that exists surrounding the development of nuclear weapons. But are there any powerful voices in Iran that are counter-signaling that idea? Because if you look at North Korea, if you look at Pakistan, if you look at Russia, everyone knows these are countries that really can't be invaded because of that deterrent. And maybe people in Iran are questioning whether or not they need that deterrent.
We had 71 parliament members asking for that nuclear doctrine to be revisited. They're basically asking for making of nuclear weapons. The Iranian parliament has 290 members, so 71 is a minority. There may be more people in the parliament that like that idea but are not willing to sign a letter asking for that. The country's leader a few days ago had a speech, and he has not changed his position. There is this Islamic teaching that mass killings is prohibited, and because of that idea, then weapons of mass destruction are prohibited. If someone has to be executed, they need to go through the court system, and they may get that punishment. Or when you are at a war, then you hit the other side. The problem with nuclear weapons is that they're indiscriminate, and they have long-term ecological effects. They affect population centers for many years to come. We remember what happened in Japan, in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. So that is a serious concern. the problem exists. This is the problem that Iran has, that Iran is facing two regimes that have nuclear weapons, United States and Israel, and their conventional weapons are quite extensive. U.S. military spending is more than 100 times as that, comparison to Iran. So the question that these MPs are asking is whether the 90 million people that live in Iran can be properly protected by just conventional weapons. And it seems the country's leader believes it's possible to do that. And last time Iranian ballistic missiles managed to create a situation where the other side actually asked for the ceasefire, not Iran. How do we know that? J.D. Vance spoke about this on the first day of ceasefire. He said that he called the Amir of Qatar and conveying the idea of having a ceasefire. The Qataris called Iranian officials. Iranian officials accepted. That's how you had the ceasefire. And United States is the same country that has vetoed 4 times UN resolutions because of the word ceasefire. Mm-hmm. The objection they had was the UN resolution had asked for a ceasefire. So how is it that they ask for a ceasefire when it comes to Iran, and they reject ceasefire when it comes to Palestine? I think the difference is the type of missiles that Iran has. And so the belief of the people who don't want to have nuclear weapons is that by conventional weapons, by ballistic missiles, it's possible to defend the country. That's the analysis they have. I guess we have to wait and see whether that analysis is going to be true or not. But there is a genuine movement within Iran that thinks the only way to protect the country is through building nuclear weapons. And yes, they point to North Korea, other places that have nuclear weapons, and they have not experienced an attack. And they remember what happened to Libya. Mm-hmm. Libya, the Libyan leader had ballistic missiles with a 1,000-kilometer range. And Western governments asked him to accept MTCR, Missile Technology Control Regime. This is a made-up agreement by mostly Western governments trying to limit the range of ballistic missiles. And Libyans accepted that. The distance between Libya and Europe is about 660 kilometers. So if you have ballistic missiles with the range of 1,000 kilometers, you can hit southern Europe. But if your missiles only can go 300 kilometers, they would fall in the middle of Mediterranean Sea. Not good enough. And we remember what happened to Libya. Libya is what Iran is trying to avoid. One reason these recent talks on a snapback mechanism failed was because Western governments were asking Iran to repeat the Libyan experience, to limit its ballistic missiles. That's why things didn't go forward, because no one here likes what they see in Libya.
What are the implications of the failure of a moratorium on the snapback sanctions? How has that impacted Iran, if at all? Maybe how has it impacted the mindset of Iranians?
When you look at the text of previous UN resolutions, they don't deal with economic issues that much. oil sanctions on Iran are U.S. sanctions passed by the U.S. Congress. The banking sanctions are generally U.S. sanctions. So on paper, this snapback should not have any serious economic impact. But in reality, as you know, we have a number of television channels based in United States and Europe that are on the payroll of Netanyahu. He pays for these channels. They have this huge propaganda campaign, basically exaggerating the economic effects of a snapback. So we have had in the last number of days the price of US dollar going up, not because of any real sanctions that come out of a snapback, but more, I think it's because of this psychological war against ordinary citizens here. So people get worried, they go and buy foreign currencies to make sure that the value of their local currency is preserved. What the other side did is illegal under international law. We have that International Court of Justice ruling 1971 that if you are part of an agreement, you cannot pick and choose the articles that you want to follow. This is what Europeans have done. They are not doing their part in terms of sanctions relief. They basically left the agreement after Trump left the agreement in 2018. And then suddenly they remember there is this nuclear agreement and they want to implement two articles out of that agreement, which is a snapback. If you look at the letter that the Russian government sent to the UN Security Council, the Chinese government, the speeches they had in the last number of days, the joint letter by Iran, Russia, and China, it basically goes through a number of legal arguments why the Europeans cannot use a snapback because of the violations that they have had with regard to the nuclear agreement. So the basic position that Iran has and these countries have is that the snapback has not been used. They're not going to follow the dictates from Western governments. And the basic result is that you have disagreement within the UN Security Council. You have UK and France saying that the UN sanctions have come back. You have Russia and China that don't buy that idea. And that actually creates a space for countries that want to continue to work with Iran to do that. And we have had countries that are not working with Iran economically before a snapback. They're not going to do it after a snapback. So there is no change there. And the countries that want to continue to work with Iran, given the fact that there is this disagreement within the UN Security Council, that would give them a reason to continue to work with Iran.
And you mentioned Russia. Russia did obviously a lot for the plight of extending the relief of sanctions on Iran at the United Nations. Dmitry Polyansky gave a very fiery speech there about it in direct debates on the matter. Russia also just sent a giant military hardware plane, cargo plane, to Iran, I guess in violation of those sanctions at the same time. And they also recently announced, Iranian parliamentarians announced that Russian MiG-29 fighter jets have arrived and are being used by the Iranian Air Force now. Do you feel as though any sort of problems that maybe were apparent or rumored between Iran and Russia in the lead up and during to that 12-day war have been solved? Because I remember the Iranian ambassador to Russia, he had some odd statement about being betrayed or something like that, and it was directed at Russia in the first days of the war. And Russia, of course, denied those claims. They said anyone who's insinuating that is, selling a bunch of lies. But what do you make of that relationship right now?
That statement came from a retired deputy foreign minister. The idea that Russia was not on Iran's side. So the person who made that statement is not currently employed with Iran's foreign ministry. It was a foolish thing to say. It wasn't true, and he doesn't have a job within the Iranian government. He's at home, enjoying his retirement and occasionally causing difficulties for Iran's foreign policy. So Iran-Russia relations are good. Iran has been helpful to Russia. There are Western news outlets and Western governments that accuse Iran of sending drones to Russia, giving drones to Russia. And so there are these type of accusations for the last number of 2-3 years. And I think Russian government officials realize that if the American-Israeli plan is successful, then they would have another Ukraine on their southern border, because by destabilizing Iran, by breaking Iran apart, they would create a space for some pro-Western regime to do to Russia what Ukraine, another pro-Western regime, is doing to Russia. And you look at the map. On the southern part of Russia, you have Iran, you have Afghanistan that's not in a good shape, and Afghanistan doesn't have access to Persian Gulf or the Arabian Gulf or other Indian Ocean. It's landlocked. And then you have China. And of course, China-Russia relations are good, but no country wants to be dependent totally on another country for the access they need to global south, basically. So Iran provides that access to Russia. The current government in Iran came about by a revolution that kicked out a pro-American dictator. So the government, by its nature, is not going to be a pro-Western government. Mm-hmm. And so Russians realize that. I think Russians have been tried to be helpful. I'm sure there are Iranians here that think Russia could have done more during the war, this 12-day war. I'm sure Russians have their own limitations when it comes to these issues. They have their own interests. But overall, I think Iran-Russia relations, it's a win-win situation. Both sides are helping each other. I think Russians realize that if Israel and U.S. are successful with their plans against Iran, then Russia is going to face more pressure after that. And they realize that they're not going to like that. And this is one reason you see they object to Western plans when it comes to UN Security Council.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Foad Izadi, thank you so much for joining me here on Legitimate Targets. And Iran
is not a legitimate target.
That is true. Iran is definitely not, but the Zionist entity is. And, I like everyone else across the world watched. I watched from Moscow the events that unfolded in the 12-day war, and the courage and the sacrifice of the Iranian people and leadership and revolution is something that I think will stand the test of time and will be remembered for all of history. So I'm praying for all of you, and I wish you nothing but the best and glory to the revolution. So thank you so much for joining me today.
There is this culture of resistance here. So, and as the country experiences more pressure, this culture of resistance actually increases. This is the foolish thing about the other side. They don't realize these things.
Very true. Thank you so much.
Thank you.